in thousands of years of cold weapon warfare in Chinese history. If you had to select a true undefeated god of war, who would immediately come to mind? Would it be Sun Tzu, author of the monumental art of war? Or perhaps Bai Qi, terrifying general, who ruthlessly buried the entire Zhao army alive at Changping? Today's historical figure possesses a staggering battle record, one that leaves all other renowned generals suffocating in his shadow. Throughout his life, he fought in 76 major campaigns, securing 64 overwhelming victories and 12 draws. He did this without suffering a single defeat. His win rate on the battlefield is an absolutely terrifying 100%. He was a military genius who beat enemies into existential doubt, and a political titan who could completely restructure an entire nation. This flawlessly well-rounded genius bears a horrifying reputation in history. To secure a high official position, he murdered his own wife. To achieve success, he bit his own arm to swear a venomous oath. In his final moments, he used a lifeless corpse to drag a royal court full of officials down to the grave. Confucian scholars, he is a deeply rebellious wife-killing maniac. Yet to military strategists, he is an untouchable and supreme sage. He is Bai Qi, undoubtedly the most complex and controversial figure, a truly ruthless man of the Warring States period. Let us journey back to that brutal dog-eat-dog era, and witness how this man pushed pragmatism to its absolute limits. Using incredibly cruel methods to climb onto the altar of gods, rewind the clock to around 440 B.C. Bai Qi was born into a remarkably wealthy family. In Wei, that is right, this cold-blooded deity of slaughter was a rich heir. However, Bai Qi harbored absolutely no interest in conducting business. He had only one lifelong dream to chase: to become a high-ranking official and wield supreme power, and somehow go down in recorded history. Driven to buy his way in, he distributed money everywhere, frantically trying to grease the wheels of political power. What was the grand outcome of this brilliant plan? He burned through his cash and squandered his family's fortune. He completely failed to secure an office and became a laughingstock. His fellow townsfolk pointed fingers and viciously mocked him. An ordinary person might have been hopelessly crushed by this, but Bai Qi was a lone wolf awakening to his true nature. Facing 30 neighbors who openly jeered at him to his face, Bai Qi did not bother to argue with them. Instead, he silently drew the long sword from his waist. Swift strikes, he slaughtered over 30 people in cold blood. Fresh blood dyed the streets of the state a deep crimson. Having committed such a monstrous crime, he knew he had to run. Right before he fled, he knelt before his elderly mother. He performed an agonizingly cruel act on himself. He savagely bit his own arm until the blood flowed freely. Pointing toward the heavens, he swore a toxic oath: "Mother, as I leave today, I will become a chancellor. Otherwise I shall never set foot in this state ever again." After leaving his hometown, became a disciple under Zheng Shen, one of the most famous students of Confucius, and he diligently began studying the Confucian classics. Given his exceptional intelligence, he was on the verge of greatness. He almost made a great name for himself within the school. However, a few years later, devastating news arrived from home. Bai Qi's mother had passed away from a severe illness. According to strict Confucian rules, you do not travel far, and a son must observe a mourning period of 3 years. Yet, what did Bai Qi do with this tragic news? Remembering his venomous oath about becoming a chancellor, he astonishingly just looked up at the sky and wailed. He wiped away his tears and calmly continued his studies. He outright refused to return home for her funeral. Upon hearing this, Zheng Shen trembled with absolute rage, deeming Bai Qi to be much worse than a beast. He expelled him and completely severed their relationship. The Confucian school rejected him, and the secular world despised him. Standing at the ultimate crossroads of his strange life, Bai Qi completely and utterly cast aside all moral shackles, benevolence and morality could not buy him fame and fortune. Resolved to master the most ruthless discipline in the world, the bloody and brutal art of war. From that moment onward, the moral Wu Qi was dead, instantly, reborn as a terrifying force on the battlefield, causing his enemies to tremble at the mention of his name. After mastering military strategy, he traveled to the state of Lu. Soon after, the grand army of Qi marched upon the gates, putting the state of Lu in imminent and dire peril. The ruler recognized Wu Qi as a military prodigy. He genuinely wanted to appoint him as the supreme commander. However, some known in the royal court raised a fatal concern. Wu Qi's wife is a native of Qi. Can we trust him to lead against his wife's people? What if he colludes with the enemy and commits treason? This alarming rumor eventually reached Wu Qi's ears. An ordinary person might have written a letter in blood, or perhaps voluntarily filed for a simple divorce. But Wu Qi executed a move that sent terrifying chills everywhere. That very night, he returned to his home and personally chopped off his own wife's head. The following morning, carrying her bloody severed head, he threw it directly at the feet of the ruler. This gave birth to a famous and extraordinarily macabre idiom: killing one's wife to become a general. The ruler of Lu was absolutely and utterly terrified, but felt he had to appoint him as the commander. Once Wu Qi reached the front lines, he made quick work, inflicting a devastating and crushing defeat upon the mighty army. Wu Qi won the war, yet he lost his humanity, entirely surrendering the absolute bottom line of being human. Looking at this monster who could casually butcher his wife, the people felt nothing but deep-seated horror. It wasn't long before the ruler found a convenient excuse, and finally decided to strip him of his command. If one place doesn't want you, another surely will. Covered in intense controversy, Wu Qi journeyed to Wei, which was a massive rising power at the time. It was here that he met Marquis Wen of Wei, the visionary who actually recognized his immense talent. From this point onward, Wu Qi forged an invincible army, one that would fundamentally alter the geopolitical landscape, changing the warring states period forever. That time, the western border was constantly threatened, hunted by the Ascentine Sea, aggressively ambitious state of Qin. In order to thoroughly lock down the Qin, Wu Qi was appointed as governor of the Shihe Commandery. As soon as he assumed office, he launched a completely frenzied and radical military reform. He built a highly specialized elite force from scratch. It was practically akin to alien technology in that era. They called them the Wei martial soldiers. Do you want to join the ranks of the Wei Wuzu? Sure, but just take a look at their borderline psychotic selection standards. A soldier was required to wear 3 layers of heavy armor, fully draw a heavy crossbow with a 140-pound pull, carry a quiver of 50 crossbow bolts, and wield a long halberd, wear an iron helmet and strap a sharp sword to his waist, and carry 3 days' worth of dry rations, all while force marching roughly 50 kilometers in just half a day. In the era of cold weapons, this was squeezing the human body, squeezing it far beyond its physical limits. But if you successfully passed this grueling selection, Wu Qi would completely exempt your entire family, exempt them from all forced labor and taxes, while generously distributing houses and fertile land to you. Immense rewards will always produce incredibly brave men. Using this system that was both agonizingly cruel and irresistibly seductive, Wu Qi forged a 50,000-strong monster of steel. In 389 BC, the Battle of Yinjin spectacularly erupted. The state of Qin mobilized a staggering army of 500,000 men, desperately seeking to reclaim the Shihe region. Meanwhile, Wu Qi proactively charged into battle, leading a mere 50,000 Wei martial soldiers. A terrifying force, disparity of 1 to 10. Yet on that fateful day, the people of Qin bore witness. They bore witness to true hell on earth. 50,000 armored soldiers sliced through the Qin army's formation. They cut through like a relentless torrent of steel, with arrows falling like swarms of locusts, and halberds standing thick like a deadly forest. The 500,000-strong Qin army catastrophically collapsed. They fell in front of this unforgiving meat grinder. 50,000 absolutely shattered 500,000. In this single battle, Wu Qi violently beat the state of Qin. He beat them all the way back home, leaving them so traumatized they didn't dare breathe heavily for decades. As a direct result, the state of Wei spectacularly leaped ahead, becoming the very first superhegemon of the early Warring States period. During his tenure commanding the army in Wei, Wu Qi left behind an extraordinarily classic story, one that flawlessly encapsulates his terrifyingly effective art of leadership. In historical records, this event is widely known. It is known as sucking the pus of a soldier. On one particular occasion, while inspecting the military encampment, Wu Qi noticed a young soldier with a severe malignant ulcer. It was a nasty sore on his lower leg. The vile sore was oozing yellow fluid and radiating a putrid stench, causing the soldier to roll around on the ground in excruciating agony. The accompanying military physicians were completely at a loss about what to do. At that exact moment, a genuinely shocking scene unfolded. Wu Qi, acting as the supreme commander-in-chief, surprisingly did not hesitate to kneel down before this lowly soldier. He directly used his own mouth to suck out the foul pus, sucking out the stinking pus and infected blood. The Grand General sucking pus for a lowly private. This unbelievable event instantly spread throughout the entire army. Every single soldier was absolutely moved to tears, passionately swearing to fight to the death for General Wu. However, when this news eventually made its way back to his hometown, his mother immediately burst into tears upon hearing it. With absolute heart-wrenching despair, her neighbors found this profoundly strange and tried to console her. "Old woman, why on earth are you crying? General Wu Qi personally sucked the pus from your son's wound. This is a tremendous blessing for him." The elderly mother shook her head in total desperation and replied, "You people just do not understand. Years ago, General Wu personally sucked the pus from my husband's sore. My husband was so deeply moved that he disregarded his own life, refusing to retreat a single step. Ultimately died in combat. Today, General Wu has once again sucked the pus for my son. I know for a fact that my boy is now going to die. He is going to die on the battlefield very soon. How can I not cry? This story, when heard today, makes one's scalp tingle with dread. We simply cannot judge how much of his action was genuine care, and how much of it was ultimate calculated psychological manipulation, just a cheap trick to buy their absolute loyalty. But this is precisely who Wu Qi was. He completely disregarded morality and cared nothing for decency. He exclusively valued efficiency and results, the most extreme and radical methods imaginable. He firmly bound the minds and bodies of every soldier, tying them directly to his war chariot forcefully, transforming them into foundational stepping stones, the bloody stepping stones of his unbeaten myth. Because his military merits were simply too towering, Wu Qi ultimately faced intense jealousy and ostracization. The powerful ministers heavily forced him to leave the state. This time, he journeyed south to the expansive state of Chu. King Dao of Chu placed extraordinarily high hopes in him, directly appointing him as a Lingyan equivalent to the prime minister. Moment Wu Qi took office, he displayed his fiercely ruthless side, initiating the world-shocking reforms that bore his name. He aggressively eliminated redundant bureaucratic positions. He completely abolished the hereditary privileges of the Chu nobility and redirected all the saved funds entirely toward the army. Within a mere few years, the state of Chu rose rapidly, pacifying the southern tribes and defeating Wei to the north. Yet concurrently, Wu Qi managed to completely offend everyone. He thoroughly offended every single old aristocratic family in Chuan 381 BC. King Dao tragically died. He was the sole pillar of support for Wu Qi before the king's corpse had even grown cold. Those disenfranchised nobles immediately launched an armed rebellion. Gripping bows and spears, they violently stormed the royal palace, hellbent on hacking Wu Qi into a million pieces. The aging Wu Qi knew that he could not escape. Even if he sprouted wings, he was doomed. But in the absolute final seconds of his life, his brain continued to operate at maximum speed. He did not drop to his knees to beg for mercy, nor did he draw his sword to slit his own throat. Instead, he executed the final tactical micro-operation, the unequivocally most precise operation of his entire existence. Mustering every ounce of his remaining strength, he furiously sprinted to the royal mourning hall and violently threw himself directly on top of the king's corpse. The chaotic barrage of arrows from the rebels flew in, viciously piercing right through Wu Qi's body and turning the king's corpse into a bloody pincushion. Wu Qi breathed his very last breath in a pool of blood. It is highly likely that a cold, mocking smirk remained, lingering right there on the corners of his mouth. Why? Because he understood the intricate laws entirely too well. Chu law strictly dictated a very severe punishment. Anyone who damages the dead corpse of a monarch shall face the extermination of their entire extended family. Exterminated across 3 entire generations. The instant the new king ascended to the throne, he immediately ordered the net to be cast, executing every single member of the over 70 aristocratic families, the ones who had participated in shooting Wu Qi, and subsequently striking the body of King Dao. Using his own life and the sovereign's dead body as bait, Wu Qi managed to drag all his enemies down to hell. He exhausted every single conceivable scheme, proving himself ruthless to the very marrow of his bones. This is Wu Qi, a truly complicated man. If you attempt to measure him using conventional moral standards, he is an unadulterated scoundrel and a demonic wife killer, and an absolutely unfilial lunatic. But if you elevate your perspective to grand, sweeping history, he is a pure, unalloyed master of pragmatism, completely devoid of any distracting thoughts. In that chaotic, war-torn era where ancient rights collapsed and the strong violently preyed upon the weak, so-called benevolence and morality could not save a nation, nor could they stop the relentless clash of swords. Wu Qi used his entire life to forcefully prove one thing: when a person is willing to discard all emotions and dignity, and even discard their very humanity to achieve a goal, the sheer explosive energy they can unleash is staggering. It is more than enough to completely redraw the map. To redraw the map of the entire world. He was not a god, he was a literal demon. He burned his entire soul for the sake of immortal achievements. Amidst thousands of years of deep infamy, he permanently carved an insurmountable monument of war, a monument carved into the cold weapon era. That concludes today's story. I hope you liked it. If you thoroughly enjoy this kind of hardcore historical analysis, please long press the like button and follow me. In our next video, we will continue to part the historical fog and reveal more of those little-known, mind-blowing truths